year was 2013. While motorcycle companies were playing it safe with emissions rules and safety laws, something incredible was happening behind closed doors at Kawasaki Heavy Industries in Japan. Engineers were secretly building a revolutionary machine that would break every single rule about what a motorcycle could be forever. They created something so extreme that it could never legally touch public roads. Not because governments banned it after seeing how dangerous it was, but because Kawasaki built it to be so far outside the legal limits that getting it registered was impossible from day one. This is the real story of the Kawasaki Ninja H2R, the 326 horsepower monster that was never meant to be tamed. The truth about why they called it banned will change everything you thought you knew about how motorcycle companies really work. You've got to understand something about Kawasaki Heavy Industries. This isn't just some motorcycle company that makes weekend toys. These guys build the bullet trains that rocket through Japan at 200 miles per hour. They make jet engines for the planes you fly on. Hell, they've got parts floating around in space on the International Space Station right now. So when the big shots called a meeting in 2013, you know something serious was about to happen. The challenge they gave their engineers was simple. Build us a motorcycle that shows the world what we can really do when we stop holding back. The project got a code name, Rivermark. Sounds innocent enough, right? But behind that boring name was about to unfold one of the most ambitious motorcycle projects ever attempted. The team wasn't just some regular motorcycle engineers either. Kawasaki pulled people from their aerospace division, their industrial turbine department, even guys who worked on their robot projects. And that's exactly what started one of the craziest engineering projects in motorcycle history. The team decided to bring back a legend. You see, back in 1972, Kawasaki built this two-stroke monster called the H2 Mach 4. Riders called it the Widowmaker because it had a nasty habit of trying to kill you. The power delivery was so violent and unpredictable that it would literally try to rip the handlebars out of your hands. Insurance companies wouldn't touch it. Dealers were scared to sell it. Some racing organizations banned it before it even showed up to compete. But man, did people love that bike. The original H2 made about 74 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much today, but remember this was 1972. Most cars didn't make that much power, and unlike cars, motorcycles weigh nothing. So all that power was going straight to your brain through the seat of your pants. Fast forward to the modern project, and the engineers weren't just honoring that legacy, they were trying to multiply it by 4. So the new H2 project was going to honor that legacy, except this time, they had something the 1972 team could never dream of: access to aerospace technology. Think about that for a second. While Honda was making their engines a little better, while Yamaha was tweaking their suspension, while Suzuki was updating their electronics, Kawasaki went to their airplane people and said, make this thing fly. Not literally fly, but you get the idea. By the end of 2014, they unveiled their masterpiece. Actually, make that masterpieces plural. They didn't just build one bike, they built twins. Brothers that would live completely different lives. The street-legal H2 rolled out with all the boring stuff. Mirrors, headlights, catalytic converters, the works. It made 228 horsepower, which was already enough to embarrass pretty much every other bike on the road. But the H2R, that's where things got interesting. Picture this: a motorcycle rolling off the production line with no lights, no mirrors, covered in carbon fiber wings that look like they belong on a fighter jet, wearing racing slicks that would last about 5 minutes on actual streets, and breathing through an exhaust so loud it could set off car alarms 3 blocks away. Oh, and it made 326 horsepower. Just to put that in perspective, that's more power than most sports cars. This wasn't just Kawasaki building another fast bike. This was them giving the finger to every safety regulation, every noise law, every emissions rule that had been holding motorcycles back for decades. Now let's talk about what makes this thing tick, because the engineering here is absolutely nuts. Most motorcycle engines work pretty much the same way they did 50 years ago. You've got pistons, you've got valves, you suck in air, you burn fuel, you make power. Simple stuff. Even the fastest superbikes today are basically just refined versions of that same old recipe. The H2R threw that recipe in the trash. At the heart of this beast is a 998 cubic centimeter engine, which isn't that big by motorcycle standards, but bolted to the side of that engine is something you've probably never seen on a bike before: a supercharger. Now, other companies have tried forced induction on motorcycles. Usually they buy some aftermarket turbocharger, bolt it on, and hope the engine doesn't explode. Kawasaki didn't do that. They built their own supercharger from scratch, in-house, with their airplane guys helping out. That bright orange thing sitting on the side of the engine isn't just for looks. It's spinning at 130,000 revolutions per minute. To put that in perspective, that's faster than a Formula One engine revs. It's forcing 200 liters of air per second into the combustion chambers. And here's the crazy part. It does all this without creating the heat problems that usually kill forced induction engines. The Kawasaki engineers figured out how to make more power without melting anything. That supercharger alone is why the H2R makes 50% more power than other liter bikes. While everyone else was playing it safe, Kawasaki was rewriting the rules completely. The development of that supercharger took 3 years. 3 years of testing different impeller designs, trying various gear ratios, figuring out how to keep the thing from overheating or exploding. They went through dozens of prototypes before they got it right. And when they finally did, they had something that no other motorcycle manufacturer has been able to replicate even today. Want to know how obsessive they got? The impeller is balanced to tolerances measured in microns. The housing is cast using techniques borrowed from jet engine manufacturing. The planetary gear system that drives it uses materials that didn't exist when the original H2 was built. But they weren't done yet. Look at the front of this machine, and you'll see something that looks like it came off a race car. Those aren't just decorative pieces. Those are functional aerodynamic wings. Here's the problem. When you've got 326 horsepower pushing you forward, physics starts working against you. The H2R's wheelbase is too short to stay stable once you get past 180 miles per hour. The front wheel wants to come up. And if that happens at 200 miles per hour, you're basically a human missile. Kawasaki's solution was pure genius. Those carbon fiber winglets push about 110 pounds of downforce onto the front tire at 150 miles per hour. It's like having an invisible person sitting on the front of the bike, keeping it planted to the ground. This is the kind of problem solving you see in aerospace engineering, not motorcycle manufacturing. These guys were solving issues that most bike companies don't even know exist. The testing process for those wings was absolutely insane. Kawasaki didn't just stick them in a wind tunnel and call it good. They built a rolling road test rig that could simulate speeds up to 250 miles per hour. They tested dozens of different wing configurations, different angles, different mounting positions. Some early prototypes created so much downforce that they actually slowed the bike down more than they helped stability. The final wing design you see on production, H2Rs, creates exactly the right amount of downforce without adding too much drag. It's a balancing act that took hundreds of hours of testing to get right. The numbers are absolutely bonkers. 310 horsepower in still air, 326 horsepower once the ram air system kicks in at speed, 120 pound-feet of torque at 12,500 RPM. And the whole thing weighs just 400 to 76 pounds. Kawasaki claimed it would hit 205 miles per hour, but Turkish racing legend Kenan Sofuoglu had different ideas. In 2016, he strapped himself to an H2R and hit 249 miles per hour across a bridge in Turkey. The bike didn't just break the unofficial speed limit that most manufacturers stick to, it completely destroyed it. Now here's where the story gets really interesting, and where most people get the facts wrong. The H2R isn't banned like some piece of contraband that governments are actively hunting down. The truth is way more clever than that. Every country has rules about what can and can't drive on public roads. Safety equipment, noise limits, emission standards, that kind of stuff. The H2R violates pretty much every single one of these rules, and Kawasaki designed it that way from the very beginning. No headlights, no mirrors, no turn signals. The exhaust has no catalytic converter. And the noise, oh man, the noise. This thing produces 120 decibels of pure mechanical fury. To give you an idea of how loud that is, imagine standing about 600 feet away from where lightning just struck. That thunder that hits your ears, the H2R, is louder than that. Most states limit motorcycles to around 84 decibels. European countries are even stricter at 77 decibels. The H2R can be 43 decibels over those limits, and remember, decibels aren't like regular numbers. That's not just a little bit louder, that's thousands of times more sound energy hitting your ears. But here's the brilliant part. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't Kawasaki building a bike and then realizing, oops, we can't make this street legal. This was calculated. This was planned. This was marketing genius disguised as engineering madness. Think about it from Kawasaki's perspective. They could have spent years and millions of dollars trying to make this thing pass emissions tests and noise regulations. They would have had to add catalytic converters, which would have hurt performance. They would have had to quiet the exhaust, which would have killed that amazing supercharger sound. They would have had to add all sorts of safety equipment that would have added weight. Instead, they said, forget all that. We're building this thing for the track, and we're going to make it the most extreme motorcycle anyone has ever seen. And then they let the internet do the marketing for them. Every video thumbnail that says banned motorcycle, every forum argument about whether it's actually illegal, every whispered conversation about the bike you can't ride on the street. That's not accidental marketing, that's brilliant marketing. The H2R brings people into Kawasaki dealerships. They come in asking about the banned bike, and they leave with a regular Ninja because they can't afford the $63,000 track weapon. Speaking of actually buying one, let me tell you what that experience is like. First, you've got to find a dealer who's even allowed to sell them. Kawasaki doesn't let just anyone sell these things. Then you've got to sign a contract that's longer than most people's mortgage agreements, acknowledging that this thing is track only, that it needs expensive maintenance, and that Kawasaki won't warranty it if something goes wrong. Then there's insurance. Most companies won't touch it. The ones that will charge you massive premiums and require GPS tracking to prove you're not riding it on the street. Track day organizers require special damage deposits because if you crash this thing, the replacement parts cost more than most people's cars. Want to know how expensive the parts are? Each one of those carbon fiber winglets costs $1,800. That's per winglet. There are 2 of them. The buying process itself is like something out of a spy movie. Kawasaki only allocates a certain number of H2Rs to each country every year. In the United States, they might only allow 200 or 300 bikes total. Dealers have to apply to Kawasaki for allocation slots, and they don't give them to just anyone. Some dealers require you to prove you have track experience before they'll even put you on the waiting list. Others want to see that you've bought other expensive Kawasaki's in the past. It's not unusual for someone to wait 2 years just for the chance to buy one. And once you do get one, the ownership experience is unlike anything else in motorcycling. Remember, this thing has no warranty, none. If something breaks, you're on your own. Want to know what it costs to replace the engine if something goes catastrophically wrong? Try $35,000. That's more than most people pay for a car. But here's something that might surprise you. Despite all that horsepower, the H2R isn't actually the quickest bike off the line. Modern electric motorcycles like the Energica can beat it to 60 miles per hour. Why? Because all that power is useless if you can't get it to the ground. The H2R needs sophisticated wheelie control just to keep the front wheel down, and that electronic intervention costs precious time at the start. Magazine tests clock the H2R at 2.9 seconds to 60 miles per hour. That's the same as Ducati's Panigale 5 4S, and actually slower than the street-legal H2's 2.6 seconds. Those massive wings that keep it stable at high speeds also create drag at lower speeds. This bike wasn't built for stoplight racing. It was built for one thing: pure, unfiltered speed. The maintenance requirements are just as extreme as the performance. Kawasaki insists you use specific Bridgestone racing tires with tire warmers before every single track session. The computer logs every minute you spend above 8,000 RPM, and after just 15 hours at those revs, you need a complete engine teardown and inspection. That service costs $8,000. For comparison, that's about what MotoGP teams spend per race weekend on engine maintenance. This isn't just a motorcycle that happens to be expensive to maintain. This is basically a MotoGP bike that Kawasaki decided to sell to regular people. But despite all the costs and complications, the H2R created a cultural phenomenon. Search social media for H2R content, and you'll notice something funny. Owners post dyno charts way more often than lap times. Why? Because most of them can't actually ride the thing very often. Track access is limited, noise restrictions are everywhere. So instead of racing, they end up bragging about horsepower numbers. The sound alone has made this bike internet famous. That supercharger whine building up to a full mechanical scream gets millions of views on video platforms. Every tunnel run becomes viral content. People who will never ride a motorcycle in their lives watch H2R videos just to hear that sound. And that sound has changed the entire motorcycle industry. After the H2R came out, suddenly every manufacturer started caring about aerodynamics. Ducati added wings to their V4R. BMW put carbon winglets on their M1000RR. Even Honda, the most conservative of the Japanese manufacturers, decided their flagship CBR needed aerodynamic aids. The supercharger technology that started with the H2R now powers Kawasaki's sport touring bikes. They're even using lessons learned from this project in their experimental hydrogen hybrid prototypes. One bike changed how an entire industry thinks about performance. The reaction from other manufacturers was pretty telling. At first, they dismissed it as a marketing stunt. Honda executives were quoted as saying forced induction on motorcycles was a dead end. Yamaha said aerodynamic aids were unnecessary for street bikes. Suzuki basically ignored it completely. But then the performance numbers started coming in. Then the sales figures. Then the media attention. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know how Kawasaki had pulled this off. Within 2 years, every major manufacturer had aerodynamic wing projects in development. Ducati was the first to follow with their V4R wings, but BMW, Honda, Yamaha, even Aprilia started working on their own versions. The H2R didn't just change Kawasaki, it forced every company to rethink what a modern superbike could be. The influence goes deeper than just aerodynamics, though. The H2R proved that there was a market for extremely high performance, no-compromise motorcycles. Before the H2R, most companies assumed that anything over 200 horsepower was too much for regular buyers. The H2R showed that wasn't true. Here's something interesting. The regulations that keep the H2R off the street actually make it more desirable, not less. If every commuter could buy a 326 horsepower motorcycle at their local dealer, it wouldn't be special. The fact that it's difficult to buy, expensive to maintain, and impossible to ride legally on the street just adds to the mystique. Even getting it onto a racetrack is becoming harder. European circuits are cracking down on noise limits during public track days. Some famous tracks like Laguna Seca only allow bikes that produce less than 96 decibels, which means the H2R is banned there too. So H2R owners have become nomads, trailing their bikes from one tolerant airstrip to another, looking for places where they can actually use what they bought. The riders who do get to experience the H2R at full potential describe it in almost religious terms. Professional racer Josh Herron said riding one was like being shot out of a cannon while someone screamed in your ear. Another owner described the acceleration as feeling like the bike was trying to leave you behind. The psychological effect is as intense as the physical one. Most motorcycles feel fast until you ride something faster. The H2R doesn't work that way. It resets your entire understanding of what fast means. Riders report that after a session on an H2R, their normal superbikes feel slow and boring. But it's not just about straight-line speed. The H2R handles better than it has any right to. That low weight, combined with those aerodynamic aids, means it can corner with the best superbikes while having twice the power. It's like having a MotoGP bike that you can actually buy. Meanwhile, regulations keep getting stricter. European proposals want even lower noise limits. California is requiring tamper-proof engine computers starting in 2026. Each new rule makes it less likely that we'll ever see another H2R-style machine, at least one that burns gasoline. Electric hyperbikes are getting close to matching the H2R's top speed numbers without any of the noise or emissions issues. But there's something they can't replicate: the visceral, violent experience that H2R riders describe. The feeling of the supercharger boost hitting like a second engine above 10,000 RPM. The way the horizon seems to bend when you're accelerating. The sound of what feels like a jet engine intake swallowing the atmosphere around you. You can't get that from an electric motor, no matter how fast it is. This creates an interesting dilemma for the future of performance motorcycles. Electric bikes are getting incredibly fast, incredibly quickly. The newest electric hyperbikes can hit 200 miles per hour with zero emissions and barely any noise. From a purely rational standpoint, they're better motorcycles. But motorcycles were never about being rational. They're about emotion, about experience, about the connection between man and machine. And right now, nothing creates that connection quite like the H2R. Kawasaki knows this. That's why they're working on hybrid systems that combine electric motors with small displacement engines. They want to keep some of that mechanical character while meeting future emissions standards. But it's a tough balance to strike. The H2R might represent the peak of internal combustion motorcycle performance, not just because of the regulations, but because there's only so far you can push the physics of burning gasoline. Future bikes might be faster, but they probably won't be more extreme. When you strip away all the clickbait headlines and internet arguments, what you find is something pretty remarkable. A machine that was designed to completely ignore road regulations rather than try to sneak around them. This isn't an outlaw bike that's breaking the law. This is a rolling laboratory that traded legal compliance for pure performance. The ban isn't punishment, it's protection, keeping regular traffic away from something that was meant for professionals in controlled environments. The H2R is less rebel, more research project. It's Kawasaki's way of saying, here's what we can build when we don't have to worry about rules, regulations, or common sense. And honestly, that might be the most shocking thing about this whole story. Not that they built something this extreme, but that they were allowed to sell it to the public at all. Is the H2R the greatest engineering achievement disguised as marketing, or brilliant marketing disguised as engineering? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Next week, we explore Ducati's $72,000 Desmo Sedici RR, the MotoGP replica so extreme that only 1,500 people could afford to discover why it was completely unrideable.